Okay, so today we're going to be looking at Howard's Mill. Howard's Mill is Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor, and I'll be your host as we go through all of the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new to the channel, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to that in the description below, and it's going to give you a pretty good sense of what we do here at the Horror Movie Syllabus. Generally, we look at a particular subgenre of horror, and then we pick 3 movies from that subgenre to explore, but this is a little bit of a different video. This is our Is It Syllabus-Worthy series. This is where I take a horror movie that was recommended by you guys in the comments to one of my other videos, something I've never seen before, and I watch it for the first time, and then I let you guys know, is it syllabus worthy? Is it interesting enough, good enough, noteworthy enough to make it onto the horror movie syllabus? And today's recommendation was Howard's Mill. And Howard's Mill was recommended by Kevin Sims, who recommended it in our mockumentary video, in the comments to that video. And Kevin didn't give too much information away. Obviously, mockumentary, because it was in the mockumentary subgenre video. But also, he just recommended this one and Savage Land. And I watched Savage Land, which was fantastic. Absolutely great. So this one kind of had me excited because if it's being mentioned in the same breath as Savage Land, hopefully it's going to be really, really good, right? But that's all I knew. Kevin didn't give me any other information on this, and I didn't go in looking for any information or any synopses or anything like that ahead of time. I didn't even watch a trailer. I just watched this unseen, all I knew mockumentary. That's it. So I went into it blind, and did I like it? Did I hate it? Let's find out. Like I said, the movie that we're looking at today is Howard's Mill. Howard's Mill came out in 2021 and was directed by someone named Shannon Houchins. And I'm not familiar with him at all. And it's not a surprise because when I looked him up, it seems like this might be his only feature film. It looks like he's done some writing and some producing, but he hasn't done a lot of directing, and at least not of feature films. And this was really his only thing to speak of. So there wasn't much to go on in terms of pedigree there, but that's kind of actually a good thing when it comes to a mockumentary. It kind of gives it a little bit more verisimilitude, and that's of course something I'm always looking into when I watch these kind of movies: is how real does it feel? How much can I buy into the premise and the concept, and kind of forget that it's actually a mockumentary and not a real documentary? If you haven't seen it before, the movie takes place in rural Tennessee on a property called Howard's Mill and is centered around a couple of documentarians who are investigating a mysterious disappearance of a man's wife. And he joins their hunt to try to help figure out what happened to her. But as they dig into this mystery, they find out there's a lot of missing people that have gone missing on this property, and a lot of other really weird things that have happened here. And it's really starting to become an issue of whether or not there's a regular reason for this or a metaphysical, supernatural reason. And I'm going to go ahead and stop there so as to not spoil the movie anymore, because the mystery is one of the key parts of what makes this movie so compelling. Like I said, the format matters to me when it comes to mockumentary. Like trying to make this feel realistic or buyable as a real documentary about a real mystery issue, whatever, is key to me liking the movie. And this one does an extremely good job of this. The movie is a very well-made mockumentary. They've really captured the standard documentary format rather well. They've shot B-roll that they use overlaid with voiceovers. They've got interviews with what are actors but are playing people that that are involved in this whole mystery, and interviewing them. They have this whole setting in rural Tennessee on a property that is actually a real property, apparently. The story is not a real story, but the property is real, apparently. And I love that. I love that they took a real property and they did such a good job with selling people on this mystery that if you Google this, you find out people actually asking, is this a real story? Is this a real mystery? It's not. It's not a real story, but they've rooted it in a real location, which I think is really good. And they've got that whole convincing documentary thing down pat. The filmmaking is on point here. They even have some cool things where, like, they have some found footage aspects. Like documentaries often will interweave some found footage aspects into the mockumentary, and they do that here. They have a video, like a family video of a guy whose daughter disappeared, and then the scene, the guy goes running after the daughter when she goes out of sight. She disappears, and he goes running after her, and the camera is pointing at the ground because he wouldn't be filming her at that point when he's running after her, he would be running and the camera would just be in his hand filming whatever, filming the ground. And they did that here. And then of course he drops it at some point. And it drops and the framing is perfect, white, red, whatever. But I hadn't seen that in a long time. The aspect of somebody just like the camera seeing whatever's on the ground because you're running with it and you're not holding it up to film. You're just running with it in your hand. Nice touch. Gave it that authenticity that really made it feel like an actual piece of video that would have been found or uncovered and used in this documentary because it wasn't great. And that was cool. It really was making me buy into the reality of this mockumentary. More on that because I think that is where its biggest success is. And we're going to talk about it a little bit more. But it commits to the bit. It commits to the fake story. It commits to the whole documentary feeling of it. And it really does convince people that it's real. In fact, when I was looking up, doing research after the movie, I looked up the Rotten Tomato scores, and they're not super great, but that's not the point. The point was that the people reviewing it, the viewer reviews, because there's no critical reviews, but the viewer reviews, a lot of people were giving it low marks because they got fooled. They thought it was real, and then when they found out it wasn't real, they were mad. And I kind of feel like that's the testimony of a really great mockumentary. That's one that really lands and sticks the landing. If it made you think it's real, like Blair Witch, that's great. But people don't like to be tricked. I've noticed that people really don't like being tricked, and they react poorly to it. That's why I think there was a lot of backlash to Blair Witch Project when people realized they'd been had. And I think that the same thing happened with the people reviewing this on Rotten Tomatoes. They'd been had, they bought into it, and when they found out it was actors, they were disappointed. They were upset, and that kind of fueled the reviews, the negative reviews. And it's a bummer because it didn't deserve that. On the contrary, it deserved to get much better reviews because it fooled them, because it made them think it was real. Now, that said, there are aspects of this that I think fall short. Like the people who are fooled into being real are kind of ignoring some of these little flaws that, for me at least, kept it from being 100% completely convincing. Like some of the characters in there are a little bit cliche. They feel like characters that are serving a plot point in a story, and they're just not really like their portrayals feel cliche. They feel like a film portrayal of a character, like the dad who lost his daughter, who is like a drunk now, and he just imagine like the drunk the parent who's lost their kid, and in your head, and that's exactly what he looks like, right? In the robe, and he's not dressed well, and he's unkempt and unshaven, and his hair is all messy, and he's drinking while he's on the interview, and his house is a mess. It's just so cliche and obvious. And like some of the neighbors that have been interviewed in this, just like, we never saw anything, and it was just like the kindly neighbors who just were completely oblivious. It just feels very generic and cliche. But also, when you see this in real life, when you see documentaries, you kind of see people like that. I think people kind of act the way they're expected to act in a way. So I don't know how much of that is just like filmmaking flaw and how much of that is just that is kind of how people act in life. I don't know. But to me, it did feel a little bit cliche. It did feel a little bit forced, like, kind of filmic, not really feeling reality. And then some of the actors do feel like they are acting. Like some of the dialogue feels like scripted dialogue. It doesn't feel like natural coming out of their mouth. And it didn't feel like, I feel like there were lines that were written for them. And instead of just like letting them ad lib a lot, and it felt a little forced and unnatural. Like it didn't feel like people actually talking. And they did kind of take me a little bit, like some of the scenes in the movie, like they felt a little staged, like when you're in these rooms or whatever, and they feel like they're staged rooms, like they're staged, and characters are going to find exactly what they need to find when they need to find, and the camera's going to be right there for it. Like there's a scene where they're in a basement and they're digging up stuff that they're finding, like artifacts that relate to this little girl, and they're like barely buried. Like there's some dirt thrown on them. And they're like, look at this, and then look at this, and it feels very staged and convenient. That's the word I'm looking for. It feels very convenient for them to find some of these things, and you know what? Whatever, man. Like, there's other little things to nitpick, like, how they interview people and there's like a little thing at the bottom to tell you who they are. And sometimes it does it and sometimes it doesn't do it. And some people are identified and some people are not identified. It's inconsistent there, but it didn't really matter all that much. Like even the use of the B-roll, which I was praising earlier on, because I think it's really well done. They maybe go to that well a little too much, to be honest with you. But these are all nitpicks. Like I'm gonna be honest with you, they're nitpicks. These are not big problems that like take me too much out of the movie. Took me a little bit out of the movie. Kind of broke that verisimilitude just a little bit. Broke that veneer of reality just a little bit, but not so much that I stopped having a good time because the mystery was really compelling. It was really interesting. Like the way they set up this farm property that people keep going missing on and what's happening is really set up well, and then I feel like it delivers really well. Like they start out with kind of a true crime aspect or two, right? Like this guy's wife went missing and of course he is the lead suspect, right? Clearly he killed her. And they spent a lot of time delving into like, did he kill her and what are the motives and was she cheating on him and were they fighting? And they talked to detectives of the police who were looking into him and stuff like that. And then 15, 20 minutes in, it takes a bit of a turn when he's like, hey, they're not even talking about all of the other people that went missing on this property. Bam, now you've got a whole mystery, and it kind of turns the whole thing on its head. It goes from being true crime mystery to something much bigger and much more interesting and much more different, and went a direction I did not think it was going to go. I thought it was going to be like a standard murder mystery true crime doc, and if it had been a true crime mockumentary, it would have been really good. But this was a fresher take. It started coming up with these different ideas, these different theories of what's happening on this property. And you go from murder to other speculation things like alien stuff and supernatural stuff and paranormal stuff, metaphysical stuff. And I have to get kind of vague here because I don't want to spoil the mystery for you, but it starts presenting a couple of different ideas of what could be happening. And all of them, from a movie standpoint, seem plausible. Like in real life, you'd probably discount a lot of these ideas, but you're watching a movie, so you're like, this might actually be the way they're going to go. Are they going to go this way? Oh, are they going to go this way? And they keep kind of changing it up in a way that I thought was really good. It kept it feeling fresh, kept me engaged, kept me from guessing what was going on. Now, I'll admit there are some aspects where they have to give you some like very convenient exposition. An expert will come in and give you a little blurb about something, or a historian will come in and give you some blurbs about something and explaining some history or whatever. And kind of give you a little download of information so you can understand the research or do what's going on. But I can forgive it because I don't know how else you would do that. And I think a real documentary would do the exact same thing. If they did research on the history of a property, they would get a historian on there to talk about the history of the property, right? If they're exploring a theory about something that happens on the property, they'd get an expert in that field to talk about that. So that felt forgivable, believable, honest, and then the actors were fine on those experts too. So like I didn't have too much of a problem with the exposition because I felt like they did it as well as could be done for a mockumentary, and I just rolled with it. And I needed that information. Without information, I wasn't going to be able to follow what was going on, and I wouldn't be as invested. So it's a forgivable aspect to give me a lot of exposition in those aspects, but they did it in a way that I felt worked pretty well. And then they get to an ending that is maybe incomplete or inconsistent or not inconsistent, like incomplete or unconvincing or unsatisfying. Maybe I like the ending a lot. I think the ending's very good, but I could see some people. In fact, I did see some people on the research saying that they didn't like the way it ended. They felt like they were like left a little hanging or didn't get everything or they felt that they did understand what had happened, but they thought that it was kind of a bogus ending. They didn't really like it. They thought it was unearned or something like that. I don't agree with any of that. I don't agree with any of that at all. I think the ending is solid. I think it's very, very good. And I think what you've got here is a very solid mockumentary. It's made very, very well. It's got a really compelling mystery. It's got a little bit of flaws in it, sure, but overall, solid work for this one, for Howard's Mill. But is it solid enough to make it on the horror movie syllabus? Let's find out. So, is Howard's Mill syllabus worthy? I'm going to say it just misses it, but just barely. It just barely misses it. And it's only because you can't beat out the best. Like the best in the mockumentary subgenre is so good. Savage Land is amazing. Lake Mungo is amazing. And this one doesn't quite hit that level. And that's not to say that that's a bad movie, because those movies are, to me, like top tier, pinnacle, like gold standard. The fact that this one's not quite pinnacle, not quite gold standard, is not a reason to say it's bad, but it is a reason to say that at least as a mockumentary, it's probably not going to make the grade. It's not going to fight its way into there. But maybe, because even though it's not the level of those mockumentary winners that we've talked about in the channel already, you can make an argument for some other subgenres. Maybe you could make an argument here for the mystery subgenre. Like I said, there's a debate as to whether or not the mystery really lands whether whether it's satisfying, and I think it is, but it's not. That's not a universal opinion. But you can make an argument for a mystery subgenre. There are other subgenres you can make a really good case for here. I can't go into those without spoiling the movie, so I'm not going to say it. But if you've seen the movie, you probably have an idea of at least one that I'm thinking of, and there's probably a couple that you can maybe think of where there could be an argument to be made that it could maybe squeeze its way onto one of those, at least as an extra credit. But we're not going to talk about that because, again, I don't want to spoil it for you, because I do think you should see the movie. Like, this movie, admittedly, doesn't have a pedigree. Like, it doesn't have a reputation like Mungo does, for example. So, like, that also kind of factors into the decision about it being syllabus-worthy. There's not a huge cult love for it. There's a little bit of a cult love for it. Like, a couple people have told me about this movie, not just Kevin. So there is some love for it, but it doesn't really. I mean, it doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, right? Like, usually I go to Wikipedia as like my first stop for researching a movie after I've watched it, and there's not even a Wikipedia page for it. So I was looking at Rotten Tomatoes and a couple other reviews and stuff like that. The Rotten Tomatoes didn't even have a Rotten Tomatoes score for it. It has an audience score for it that's not very good, and I talked about why, but it doesn't even have the critics talking about it. So it's really under the radar in that sense, which doesn't necessarily by itself mean it doesn't make the syllabus, but it's something that gets factored into it because it doesn't have the noteworthiness of something like, for example, Lake Mungo. But it is a really solid, entertaining, good watch. It's a good movie. I really liked it quite a bit. I just, like I said, it just pales in comparison a little bit to the cream of the crop, but it's still solidly good, and I would highly recommend it. Now, I understand that the filmmaker Shannon Houchins hasn't made any other feature films, but he did make a TV version of Howard's Mill that I don't know if it's exactly a sequel or if it's just a TV reboot of it or whatever. I didn't read into it. I haven't seen it yet, and I'm not sure I'll bother because what I did read about it seems to indicate that it's basically just a remake of the movie, just longer and longer form. And I don't think the movie needs to be longer. I think it's really well paced and perfect length. I don't think that needs to be messed with. It definitely doesn't need to be drawn out with additional stuff. I didn't really feel like there was anything that was left out of the movie. Like, I wouldn't mind seeing a sequel that takes place in a decade, and if you've seen the movie, maybe you understand that a little bit. That might be interesting. So, if you want to make a movie in 10 years, that would be kind of cool, but I don't think I need a longer version of this movie. So I doubt I'll get into the TV series, but if you've seen it, let me know, and let me know if it's worth watching. But the movie's definitely worth watching. I would definitely recommend checking this one out and then coming back and let me know your thoughts on it, because I do think it's a little underrated. It's not getting as much buzz as it should be. Again, not quite enough to be on the syllabus, but definitely enough to be mentioned, like I said, maybe as an extra credit, because it really is under the radar and deserves more love. So that's my thoughts on Howard's Mill. Like I said, underrated. Check it out. Let me know what you think of it if you do check it out. And if you've already seen it, let me know your thoughts on it. Do you think, like I do, that it's really great but underrated? And Kevin Sims thinks so, and I know a few others of you who've talked to me about it think so. So chime in the comments below what you thought of this one. And again, if you haven't seen it, check it out. And now it's time to check out a horror trivia pursuit card. As you know, I like to look at these on camera and answer these on camera, so I don't cheat. We're going to go into a horror trivia pursuit card, and this is kind of a psychological horror movie, so let's look into the psychological category on the card. And the question is this: who directed the film Get Out from 2017? Now, this is what we call an underhanded softball pitch, right? This is a super easy question. If you know horror, or even if you just know film in the last, 8 years or so, you should know the answer to this question. It's a pretty big deal. This is a pretty well-known horror filmmaker at this point, but he was well-known even before that. And Get Out made a big buzz, right? It was Academy Award nominated. This person won an Academy Award, not for directing the movie, but for writing the movie, if I recall correctly. So this is a well-known person, got a lot of press and a lot of publicity for making this movie, and this movie got a lot of buzz. A lot of people saw it. It was financially successful. It was critically successful, and I love it. I think it's an amazing movie. We did talk about it on the channel, and I think this movie is fantastic, and I think this filmmaker is really quite great, and I look forward to everything that he does. And I've already given you a clue that it's a he, but I mean, honestly, in this day and age, there's so few female directors that get recognition that it's almost a given that it's a he, which is unfortunate, but it is the truth a lot of the time. And so it is a he. I'm kind of prattling on to give you a little bit of time to think about it, but like I said, I feel like this is a really easy question. At least it is easy to me, and maybe it's not easy to everybody, but time for you to lock in an answer. So make a guess if you don't know, but I'm guessing a lot of you know. Lock in your answer. I'm going to give you my answer. Ready? Okay, my answer is, of course, Jordan Peele, and the card says Jordan Peele of Comedy Central series Key and Peele. Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Key and Peele, a comedy duo, was great. They did sketch comedy on Comedy Central, and it was funny. And then Jordan Peele makes this movie, his feature debut, and it's this really incredible horror film that also has social commentary in it. It's funny, it's scary, and it's beautifully made. Really knocks it out of the park. Gets an Academy Award for it. Just does a great job with this movie. And it's like, who saw that coming from Key and Peele, right? But it's a great movie. If you haven't seen it for some reason, by all means, check it out. It is a must see. It's so good. But I'm guessing a lot of you have seen it. And I'm guessing a lot of you got this right. But if you didn't get it right, let me know what your wrong answer is in the comments below. I love a good wrong answer. Did you guess Keegan-Michael Key? Because that would be really funny if you guessed Keegan-Michael Key. But let me know what your wrong answers were. Let me know if you've got any other recommendations I need to check out, mockumentary or otherwise, because this was a great recommendation. Thank you again, Kevin, for the recommendation. I really appreciate it. I had a great time watching this one. And keep those recommendations coming. You guys are great. Thank you for sticking around to the end of the channel and into the video. And if you leave more recommendations, maybe we'll do more videos on what you've talked about and what you've recommended. But until then, I'm just going to say, class dismissed.